morning, Rise. Good morning, good morning. Good to be back and preaching. It's been a couple weeks since I preached. So excited to jump in again today. Last weekend, I had a chance to be down in Tijuana with my family, along with a lot of others from Rise City, to be a part of the 9th of 10 home builds that we've had down in Mexico, which is so extraordinary. And actually right now, our 10th team is down there and likely going to be dedicating this home to a family very shortly. So in total, in 2022, 10 new homes that our Christmas offering last year helped pay for, and 148 of you, 148 different people, adults and kids, throughout the course of the year went down there and built one of these homes. It truly is extraordinary. And I was just thinking about, think about this, 10 families this year on Christmas. 10 families for the first time, perhaps ever, they're going to be under a permanent roof and not worried about it getting blown over, and actually having a concrete slab and not dirt, and to be like, man, we know Christmas is about the greatest gift that Christ came, but this is a pretty good gift too this year. It's exceptional. And so our collective generosity, I was just so moved by it. And honestly, I wasn't prepared to be as moved and even as inspired as I was by the person that we had the opportunity to build a house for last weekend. Her name is Maricela. Maricela is a single mother. She has 2 children. She has a 16-year-old daughter as well as a 2-year-old son. And here's the thing about Maricela. I was amazed at just her faith and her tenacity and fierceness as a mama. But 7 years ago, she chose to commit to trying to purchased this piece of land for $11,000. It was just like this little small area with dirt and a lot of trash. And Maricela makes $90 a week, so that's like $360 a month. You can't even get out of Costco for $360 these days. Can I get an amen? Lord help us at that place, right? But for 7 years, she's been faithfully paying monthly this land payment. And then after 7 years, can you imagine, here's this group that comes from San Diego, and in 16 hours, there's a house. That is incredible. And to see from her just God's breakthrough and God coming through in the midst of her continual perseverance and her faith, it was super inspiring. And when we had the chance at the end kind of circle around before we gave her the keys, we did this dedication. And we get to say a couple words to her. When I had my chance to speak, I just wanted to just commend her fight as a mom. And as I shared, and as well as a couple others, and they shared, it broke something loose within her, because she just started crying, and you could just tell, it's been years for her of fighting for her kids, and now to have this permanent shelter is such a beautiful thing. And then to be able to dedicate the home, and they walk in, and to see their joy, and it's just 400 square feet. But nonetheless, just seeing their joy, but also their little boy, 2 years old, he loves Spider-Man, so check this out, check out his expression of joy. He's got a Spider-Man, if you put that picture up there. He's pretty fired up about his new Spidey toy. It was incredible and transformational for the family, but also for those of us who are part of it. And you were a part of it as well. And we're gonna have to figure out how we can continue to build homes down there, because it is so impacting. It's impacting for the family, it's impacting for the people who go, and man, but I just was so moved because Maricela, was such a woman of faith. And I wanted to share a brief part of her story as kind of a springboard as we talk about faith today, as we continue in this season, in this series of Advent, this word that literally means the arrival. Just trying to prepare our hearts to celebrate the ultimate arrival a couple thousand years ago when God took on a bod and became a baby in a manger named Jesus. And so throughout these 4 weeks, we're just trying to rally our hearts around some of these core aspects and virtues of Advent, of hope we talked about last week. Today, faith. Next week, we'll look at joy, and then we'll look at peace in a couple weeks, and then it'll culminate to the celebration on Christmas Eve. As we celebrate the arrival 2,000 years ago of Jesus, we also anticipate yet another Advent that's promised when Christ promises to arrive again and come back. And so our heart and our hope is that our prayers are that we would continue to say, let's not just let Christmas be Christmas, but let's draw near to God and let him change our hearts this Christmas. So in terms of faith and Advent and thinking of Maricela, there's another woman of the Christmas story that is also a woman of faith that I want to look at today. And she's someone that we're very familiar with. It's Jesus' earthly mother, Mary. But if you didn't grow up in the Catholic tradition, and so maybe you grew up in a non-Catholic church or a Protestant church, I think actually there's a disservice that's done to Mary because there's an overemphasis, I would say, probably in the Catholic tradition towards Mary that results in an underemphasis in the other tradition. And I think that we need to be paying attention to Mary. I don't know if we should put her at the same level as Jesus, but I think that, man, Mary was an incredible woman of faith. There's a lot to teach us in regards to faith. And she is who I really want to narrow our focus in on today for a few moments. But maybe it's important first to simply start by asking the question, what exactly is faith? What exactly is faith? Because I'm willing to bet if I were to ask multiple people in this room, what is faith? There would be a variety of answers given. For some, faith for you is really predicated off emotion and feelings. It's when you have these positive vibes towards God and life, and you got these kind of warm spiritual jacuzzi bubble feelings, and when the bubbles are bubbling, and you're feeling good, and you got a lot of positive vibes, I've got faith. Others of you aren't so feelings oriented, and so you're more cerebral and cognition, and you base faith more off of intellect or knowledge or perhaps beliefs. And the more information you know garners you greater trust as far as what you believe to be true. And if you have greater assurance of that truth, then you say that you have faith. But when you look at the scriptures and how the Bible uses the word faith, it really is way more robust than just feelings or knowledge and belief. And just trying to kind of take a comprehensive look, I would like to just present a definition that I've made up. So take it for what it's worth. I made it up, so I encourage you to study as well. But what is faith exactly? And I would say that when you look at the scriptures, faith really revolves around kind of three core components. It revolves around confidence, it revolves around commitment, as well as it revolves around compliance. And let me give understanding to what I mean by that. In terms of confidence, that faith is a deep-seated confidence in the character of God. It's knowing who God is, what God has done, as well as what God has promised, and having a confidence that he is all of those things, and he is good, and I am deeply rooted and anchored, as Robert talked about last week, being anchored in this confidence of God. That's a part of what faith is, which then propels this notion of a commitment. Right? So another aspect of faith is this aspect of fidelity or loyalty. Because of our confidence in who God is and the character and what he's doing and what he's promised to do, I will wholly devote my life completely to him. I'm locked in. Doesn't matter if I'm feeling all the time, I got the positive vibes, or sometimes if I don't understand everything. Nonetheless, I am fully committed. Faith is being fully committed to God, as well as this notion of compliance. Compliance simply saying that I will be all about his will in my life. And I will promise to carry out what he's called me towards, believing that it actually will bring about the best. And I'm not going to make excuses around that, but I am going to have confidence in him, committed to him, and I'm going to comply with what he says because I believe it's what's best. This is faith. And when I observed Maricela, I was moved because of just the way that she trusted in the Lord, was anchored in that, talked about how God had provided, and her hope was, she said, I want my kids to come to this belief as well. And when you look at Mary, man, Mary is just such a quintessential example of faith. And I just, I've asked this question this week. I was like, what was it, right, about Mary, right? Because think about this. Of all the women of the world, God chose Mary to be the one who would actually carry his dearly loved son for 9 months and eventually raise him. Parents out there, can I get an amen? All of us have screwed up our kids. You can try the best you want, but you jacked them up. I promise you that, because you're jacked up too. So God surveys all the women and said, who's going to jack my kid up the least? Mary. So what was it about Mary that grabbed God's attention? And I don't have an exact answer to this, but I tend to believe it's because one of the aspects was she was a woman of great faith. And so I want to look at what that looks like in her life and ask that God would help it be cultivated in our own life. Because we are called also to be men and women of faith. And so if this is what faith is, this aspect of confidence and commitment and compliance, I'm actually more interested, this is what we're going for, but what do you how do you get there? Like, what's underneath the surface? Like, what are some of the necessary ingredients that might, produce or cultivate this type of faith, right? If you got a cocktail, like, what are the ingredients of the cocktail to make the cocktail of faith? Like, what are those things? And I think there's at least three things I want to look at from Mary's life and say, are they prominent ingredients in your own life to be men and women of faith? So if you would you stand with me? I want to read Luke chapter 1. I'm going to pick up in verse 26. And I want to look at when God sends the angel Gabriel to Mary to tell her, hey, I chose you. And to see how she responds and what we can learn from that. So this is Luke chapter 1, pick it up in verse 26. It says, in the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy, Elizabeth was Mary's cousin, and the pregnancy she has, she's going to have John the Baptist, who is in her womb. It says, in that 6th month, God sent the angel Gabriel to Nazareth. It's important to see that Nazareth is not a desirable location back then. It's a small village, about 2,000 people. There was kind of this like backhanded comment made to Jesus. Can anything good come out of Nazareth? That wasn't a compliment, but it was seen to be kind of this like backwoods hick town village. But nonetheless, God sends this angel Gabriel to Nazareth, a town in Galilee, to a virgin pledged to be married to a man named Joseph. This word virgin, back in the original language, just referred to an unmarried young girl who was still sexually a virgin. So Joseph and Mary are not yet married, but yet they're abstaining in the midst of being engaged to each other. And the age likely for Mary is somewhere between 13 and 16 years old. Like, she's young. So think of that. Like, think about your teenage daughter getting visited by God in this. And so it says the virgin's pledged to be married to Joseph, a descendant of David. So the virgin's name was Mary. The angel went to her and said, greetings, you who are highly favored, the Lord is with you. Mary was greatly troubled at his words and wondered what kind of greeting this might be. But the angel said to her, do not be afraid, Mary. You have found favor with God. You will conceive and give birth to a son, and you are to call him Jesus. He will be great and will be called the Son of the Most High. The Lord God will give him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over Jacob's descendants forever. His kingdom will never end. How will this be, Mary asked the angel, since I'm a virgin? So she's like putting two and two together. She goes, I haven't done the thing, but I know the thing makes the thing, so what about that? How's that gonna work? The angel answered, the Holy Spirit will come on you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. So the Holy One will be born, will be called the Son of God. Even Elizabeth, your relative, is going to have a child in her old age, and she who was said to be unable to conceive is in her 6th month. For no word from God will ever fail. That's a great memory verse right there. For no word of God will ever fail. Verse 38, Mary says, I am the Lord's servant. Mary answered, may your word to me be fulfilled. Then the angel left her. You can have a seat. So I just want to give you a heads up. 3 ingredients for cultivating faith. I think this is a boring sermon. I'll just tell you that right now. It is. I mean, nothing I'm going to say today, you're going to be like, whoa, that was revolutionary. But oftentimes, sometimes the most elementary and even boring things, when they're actually applied, are what make the biggest difference. So I'm encouraging you to apply and not just to hear. So the first of the things that really stand out to me as far as Mary's faith and how faith is cultivated is simply this, that Mary possesses this faith that's cultivated through attentive availability. Attentive availability. I think it's really easy to just overlook the fact that Mary actually took notice and paid attention to Gabriel when he showed up to speak to her. Meaning that she was attentive. She was paying attention. She was somewhat available and maybe looking for or being prepared for or ready for God to maybe one come and say something to her in her life. And in our lives today, I think oftentimes what can have the ability to compromise becoming people of faith is we are bombarded and live in a society of perpetual distraction. And I ask myself this question, I ask this for all of us, but if God were to show up in your world and to speak to you and to give you some type of a mission for your life, would you be paying attention? Or is it possible that you might just miss him and he's over there talking and Gabriel's right there and you're just like, kind of like your kids when they look at you and they're like trying to get your attention and you're just like, yeah. Right? Like, how often do you really have undivided attention in the trajectory of God? But Mary is paying attention. She notices. And because she's available and she's noticing, she's able to hear and to respond. I think if we want to be a people of faith, then we have to begin to eliminate distraction. And I know that's so difficult because it flies in the face of like being busy with everything. But like right now, I know fantasy football's going on, but look at me. Look at me. The playoffs are still 2 weeks away. I get it. I'm playing. I know. But whether it's fantasy football or your newest news app that's going to put you in such a great mood, or it's social media, or maybe it's not even like this phone, but maybe it's just like all the time binging on some Netflix, or just how much time are we on Amazon always? Maybe it's your kids' sporting events and extracurricular activities. Maybe it's all the Christmas parties. Maybe it's all the school activities and stuff. Like, I get it. But sometimes we feel this like greater level of pride and gusto when our schedules are packed as opposed to somewhat empty so we can be attentive and available to God. Is it possible that we miss becoming people of faith because we miss the beauty of not having so many distractions pull us away from being attentive to what God might want to say? And when it comes to our lives, like there's just some things like there is such power in intentionality. You cannot rely on this one message to somehow motivate you. Motivation means nothing. Intentionality and actually doing something is where it matters. And if the only time that we give our undivided attention to the Lord is, hey God, can you work between 9 and 10:15 a.m. or 11 and 12:15 p.m. on Sundays? You got my attention. What if he came at another time? What if he wanted to come to you more than just those Sundays? And so just some really basic things. Like I said, these are just so basic, but how can you, in order to have this attentive availability, be intentional to schedule and spend time in the Word and prayer with God every day? Maybe you need to put a calendar schedule and say, this is my time. I know Jamie and I, a couple months ago, we were struggling, just feeling like, man, I never hear from God. Where's God? I just feel like kind of like the jacuzzi spiritual bubbles aren't bubbling at all for me right now. But we also took inventory to say, what are we intentionally doing? And for me, it's like, not what am I doing on my job, because that's my job. Like, you guys pay me to read the Bible. But when you're not paying me, am I still going after God? And we recognized there wasn't really, we kind of lost that habit. And so what I'm going to share is more of a description. This isn't a prescription. You need to figure out your own ways. But like we just said, then we got to start figuring this out. And so a month ago, set the alarm, 5 a.m., let it snooze once till 5:09. Get out of bed, make some coffee, kind of get ourselves oriented. And at 5:30, we're going to pray together. And we're going to read for a half hour before chaos ensues and the kids are all over the place. But we're just trying to create space, and it's been amazing. And Jamie's great at journaling and taking note of the things we pray for and watch what God does. But it changes things. But we're making space. For some of you, perhaps it's a matter of just filling your downtime or your drive time with spiritual reflection. Right? Some of you have long commutes, and it's great just to take some time versus to busy yourself with more noise, just to spend time praying. Perhaps listen to a podcast that's going to encourage you, or a sermon. Right? But there's a part of being intentional at that time. And it's not saying you can never do those other things, but a lot of times to take intentional time with God is way better than just scrolling and looking at God knows what. Perhaps it's putting yourself in environments where the voice of God is actually welcomed and encouraged. That's a huge deal. That's why we encourage you to be a part of a life group, or go to men's and women's events, or perhaps to serve on a team, or go to Mexico and build a house. It's because we're trying to create environments where people are pursuing God, talking about God, and hopefully trying to listen to what God is saying. Because my guess is most of you, your work world isn't a lot of people just clamoring about Jesus all day long. And so how do we put ourselves in intentional environments to even hear from God? Perhaps it's choosing to engage in spiritual conversations with others along with just small talk. As I've taken just own inventory of a lot of my conversations with neighbors and friends and baseball coaches and people that I hang out, like a lot of them they just stay here. Or we're talking about whatever the newest California law and that ticked us off, or what, you know what I mean? It's like, really, like, We can talk about that, but like, can we ever just broach the subject like, what's God doing in your life? Or how do you perceive those things? Especially if there's people that you know that know about you, that you have something to do with Jesus, you go to church. Like, when you have those conversations, you never know how God might even want to use the very person that you're in a conversation with to be the voice of God to you in that moment. But you're not even open yourself up to that. Or maybe that God wants to use you as a voice to somebody else. If you're a parent in here, I think a great way, both for your kids, but also for your own self, especially if you're a parent of young kids, is to partner with your kids and paying attention to what God is actually saying and doing in and through them throughout the day. I know I've shared this in here before, but one of the mantras in our household about every single day is I have my kids say that God has big plans for my life and I am ready. And at the end of the day, I'm asking, how did God exercise his big plans in and through your life today? And then the kids ask me the same thing. And that causes me then to have to pay attention throughout the day to how God might be wanting to work and speak, as well as helping my kids have eyes and ears to hear and see, right? Mary took notice of Gabriel because she was attentive and not distracted. And for us to be men and women of faith, I think that we need to learn how to become more aware and attentive just like she was. The second thing is faith is cultivated through honest humility. Honest humility. I love when Gabriel comes and he says, "Greetings to you who are highly favored." And it says that Mary was deeply troubled when she heard this. Which begs the question, why was she deeply troubled when she heard, "Greetings to you who are highly favored"? Like, I tend to think that when she saw Gabriel and he said, "Greetings to you who are highly favored," she probably like looked over her shoulder like, "Who? Oh, you talking to me?" Because she was deeply troubled because I think that she had a realistic view of herself. Because she was humble. And humility is when you have this realistic view of who you are in light of who God is and who God says you are. Humility is when you choose to see yourself and to take a low position and consider others more significant than yourself. And so when she is greeted by Gabriel and deemed highly favored, I think that she knew who she was. And so she's a little troubled, like, I can't believe that God's talking to me. Like, first off, I'm a woman in the ancient Near Eastern culture, and women aren't valued, much less have God come speak to them. So this can't possibly be for me. I'm from Nazareth, and no one wants to move there. And so I don't know how Gabriel showed up at my doorstep today, much less maybe you meant to go to Elizabeth, because Elizabeth's at least married to a priest. I just got a carpenter as a husband. Like, he doesn't have a religious pedigree either. But I think Mary was humble in her heart. And what I mean by honest humility is she was real about who she was and knew who she was. And I think that we lose the ability oftentimes to be humble people. Even though we aspire to be humble and we admire those who are humble, we live in a culture that conditions us away from humility. And I don't think always it's a direct aspect for us that we are intentionally trying to be prideful or be a people of entitlement, but it's what is bred in our cultural context of individualism. And so we have to be aware of that. When you live in a time in a society where everything is predicated around you and me, right? I mean, never before in human history could you flip a phone on yourself all the time and just document your life. I'm telling you that conditions you in a certain way to think what matters most. Or that you have customized algorithms to have your own playlist and wish list and what your preferences are, and everything that you click on then just kind of constantly gets reiterated in your feed and things like that. Like, our own world operates in a way that makes you think that you are the most important person that exists. Whether you think that or not, it's conditioning you. And so you have to fight against that. I mean, this is why cancel culture is such a big deal right now, because the people getting canceled aren't following the algorithm like everyone that's canceled. So if you're not like me, then I must not like you. So I'm just get rid of that. But it's like, wait a minute, we're all here. We're all people. And so to have humility is understanding the truth about who we are. And the cultural narrative is that, man, you're incredible. You're amazing. Even in church, God loves you like crazy. You're the most special person ever. Like, you're the most valuable thing that exists. Like, you are top notch. All your dreams can come true. Like, you blah, 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 blah. And a lot of it's beautiful and fluffy and some true, but a lot of it's garbage. And what I mean by that is when you look at the scriptures, yes, you're dearly loved. Yes, you're highly valuable. Yes, the Lord gave his life for you, but he had to give his life for you because you were a sinner. You missed the mark. You fell short. You couldn't do it. You are an absolute sinner in need of God's grace, and without God's grace in your life, who knows where you would be? And sometimes we can't even talk about the word sin anymore because that evidently triggers people to feel bad about themselves. Well, maybe sometimes you should feel bad about yourself because of you and we all put someone on a cross. And I know oftentimes older generations rail at younger generations like, the younger generation's all entitled. Really? All of us in the United States have an entitlement issue. Took about a 30-minute trip down to Tijuana, Mexico to realize that. And so we want to be a humble people. We want to not feel terrible about ourselves, but be realistic about, man, God is so good that he loved me in spite of me. That my righteousness is not predicated by my right actions, but rather my not right actions, and he nonetheless still loved me nonetheless, and he gave me his righteousness for me. And it gives me great gratitude for the life that he's breathed into my lungs that I am undeserving of, not that I'm entitled to. Like, I just wonder, like, when Mary's looking over her shoulder, like, oh, you talking to me? Like, for some in this world today, they'd be like, it's about time you saw my TikTok video. I was just wondering when you're going to show up because, I got lots of viral views. My YouTube's awesome. Like, of course you should come use me. We want to be humble people. Humility is a magnet. It attracts God, and it shines to others. God takes the lowly and he lifts them up. And so how do we become more humble? Like, is there a way to cultivate humility so we can become people of faith? I would say one of the things is to preach the gospel to yourself every single day. And what I mean by that, it's important. Take a look at the mirror and realistically understand who you are. Yes, you are a child of God, and the scriptures would even deem you, if you believe in Christ, a saint. But you are a saint only because you were a sinner first, and then God redeemed you. And so don't look at yourself to be like, man, I'm amazing. Like, man, I'm thankful that God loved me in spite of me and still is with me, and now I want to be used for him. Remind yourself each day of who you are and whose you are. Consider someone that you can help and serve without getting the recognition. Sometimes it's just good to do the right thing without being seen. Right? Like, oh, look, down here serving today. Hold on, let me get my phone out. Hashtag helping others, blessed. Well, aren't you humble? And now, can I just tell you this? I struggled with this last weekend because we're presenting a house to the family. And it's like, here is this, let's just call it spade a spade. It is a poor family. And here's all the Americans coming and taking pictures of their poverty in the house we brought them and like posting it like, look at us. And I feel like God's like, yeah, you got your reward. Hope you liked it. Now, am I saying it's always the wrong motive? You should never post. No, I'm just saying like, sometimes it's really important for the cultivation of humility in your life to just do something without having to be seen for the sake because it's the right thing and you love the person and want to help them. Or sometimes just being intentional to say, I want to celebrate the success of someone else rather than myself. I do. I want to celebrate and make much of somebody else's success rather than just being excited when it's my success. And it's pushing against a cultural tide and even a conditioning in a digital realm. But I want it when the Lord shows up in a significant way to be like, are you talking to me? Like, I'm so grateful. Oh my gosh, thank you. Yeah, wow. Like, I thought it was Pete, Pete's holy. He knows a lot. Like, you talking to me? Like, I want that to be my story and our story, to be honest in our humility. And the last thing is, I would say that it's important to see that Mary possessed this notion of courageous obedience, that faith is cultivated through courageous obedience. At the end of her talking and listening to Gabriel, her response is simply this, that I am the Lord's servant. May your word to me be fulfilled. She simply put her yes on the table, and she had no idea exactly what that meant. She just knew God said to do it, and she said yes. And that's a lot of courage. It's a ton of courage. I think sometimes with Mary, one of the reasons I probably didn't pay a lot of attention to her earlier in my life was because I just kind of took the pictures and depictions of Mary, and I was like, You ever seen pictures and depictions of Mary, like paintings? Like, she's just like this frail, meek, meager, white woman, why is she white? She's from the Middle East. She's definitely not white. But she has a blue sash or whatever, she's like holding a little baby. I was like, sweet. Like not inspired. As you read Mary's account, I don't think she's like a lot of the depictions. And maybe it would be helpful for us to kind of reframe what we think of Mary. I mean, I'm trying to think like Rey from Star Wars now. Or Katniss from the Hunger Games, or I don't know, what's the Harry Potter chick? Hermione or Harmonia or whatever her name is. I don't, my daughter loves those books. Some of you are like, your daughter likes Harry Potter? Yes, she does. But like more grit, a little bit like, yeah, like whatever this means, God, I'll say yes to you. Would you? I mean, think about what it meant for Mary to put her yes on the table. I mean, here's just some things that are so important to see just how courageous this is. Like, first off, she's a virgin, which that in and of itself probably takes some courage as a teenager just to abstain. And then after she gets, like the Holy Spirit overshadows her and she's now pregnant, it tells us in Matthew's account that her and Joseph never had sex in that whole engagement period. That's courageous obedience in and of itself, especially when like you got a baby in you and you're married and you're like, hey, come on now. But she still was like, no, I want to follow the Lord. On top of that, her yes and her being pregnant but still being a virgin, how do you think Joseph initially is going to respond to that? Like, yeah, sure, God knocked you up? I mean, thankfully God brought an angel to Joseph too, but initially, when Mary said yes, that immediately could have meant for her the end of this engagement, shame to her fiance, and even when Joseph did have this revelation, it's still, you think the family and the community believed that one initially? It brought scorn and shame from the community, but she still said, yes, God, whatever you say, I'll do it because I trust you. And then for her, on top of that, right, when the angel Gabriel is using terms like Son of God, Son of the Most High, Lord, and Kingdom, these are subversive political terms that were used at that very time to talk about the Roman Caesar, the emperor of the day. And so Gabriel's essentially saying, you're going to have a political revolution within you that's going to essentially come against the common establishment. And that's probably going to be a little bit trepidatious for you. And she still says, yes, your servant is willing. And then to know that eventually she's going to have to make a 90-mile trek via donkey in the third trimester from Nazareth to Bethlehem. How many women out there have been pregnant and are excited about that one when it's 30 to 40 degrees and you're bouncing on a donkey 10 miles a day for 9 days? Yeah, Lord, I'm on your team. It's not easy. It's not easy. And to be obedient, it's not easy. And it takes some courage. And I think for us, a lot of times, our willingness to be fully obedient, compliant, we instead like to fudge it and say, as long as I'm partially obedient, then I'm good. Can I just tell you that partial obedience is still disobedience? And the reason that we do partial obedience is because we become so sophisticated now. Because as opposed to being courageously obedient, we say things like, no, I need more information and I need to make sure it's safe. Good luck, safety on the donkey ride. I don't think she was wearing a helmet. I'm not trying to be, I'm just saying like, sometimes the way God works isn't always safe, and sometimes you don't have all of the information. In our world today, oftentimes we want to know everything and then we say, I'll go. When God says no, you need to say, I'll go, and then as you go, you'll know. And fear becomes this paralysis piece that prevents us from saying yes to God. And I'm not saying that everything God tells us to do is supposed to be unsafe. But what if some of it were to be a little bit unsafe? For some of you, lacking safety might mean just actually giving sacrificially and being generous, even though it might seem like a little bit scary and unsafe to your bank account. For some of you, it might mean to say no to moving in with him or her because you're not married yet. And that is sacrificial. That's courageous obedience. For some, right, it might just be unsafe for you to actually still be at your focused attention on your kids in your house when you get home from work because you're exhausted. I get it. I'm tired. And the last thing you want to do is continue to be intentional. But God's called you as a parent to be the primary spiritual influence in your kids' lives. And so you need to do that. And that's courageous obedience versus passing it off. All right, I just don't know enough. I can't do that. Sometimes it's courageous obedience to choose to use words that are going to build people up, or actually exercise gentleness versus harshness in conversations in subjects that you definitely don't agree with the other person. But if you compromise that or partially obey, but you still lash out or you still cut down, like, for what good is that? Some of you do need to like take some steps of faith and whatever that means and say, I gotta try this. Some of you, maybe it means that you need to fast for the first time and you're like, I've never went without 3 hours of food, much less a day. Some of you, it may be really good for you next year when we do this again to cross the border into Tijuana with a very safe charter bus and a nice establishment and build a home. But if we just say, let me pray about it, or let me get more information about it, oftentimes I'm not sure how much prayer and information it is versus dismissal to move on to the next thing so you don't have to do it. Or I don't have to do it. I'm not preaching at you, I'm preaching with you. Mary's like, dude, I don't even know, but boom, yes. And that's a big deal. So I want to encourage you, stretch yourself. Try something that you know that God calls you to do, and just do it. Most of these things you don't even need to pray about. He already said to do it in the Bible. So maybe it is choose to serve on a team. Maybe it is actually to try to get in the context of community in a life group, to be with people and try to talk about spiritual things and learn the Bible. Perhaps it's actually going on a trip. Maybe it is giving generously. Maybe it's seeking accountability and confessing to somebody. Maybe it's asking for help. Maybe it's asking for prayer. Maybe it's choosing to actually step out of your comfort zone and pray for somebody else and even pray out loud. For some of you, that's courageous obedience, and that's a great next step. For some of you, it might mean actually cut something out of your life that right now is being over-prioritized rather than the Lord. Or to step away from something that you actually like, but you know is not best for you. Perhaps it is an app. Perhaps it is a device. Perhaps it is a substance. Perhaps it is what, I don't know. But I know God is just constantly speaking. And if we have awareness and attentiveness to that, and we're humble to say, yes, God, I am your servant, and we're courageous to put the yes on the table, that type of faith that Mary exhibited brought about the Son of God who would bring an option of hope and healing for the entire world. What would your steps of faith bring about in your household, in your workplace, in our community? Perhaps even greater than that. And so it's very simple and even maybe boring. But to be men and women of faith, you got to have attention, you got to have some humility, and you need to be willing to say, I fully am in this thing and I obey. And watch what God does do that. I mean, what would that look like? I mean, and let's just remind ourselves, this is a verse from the Bible. This is Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6. It says, without faith, it is impossible to please God. He wants this type of faith. And here's the deal. When you have the confidence in who he is, it's not really that scary. It's like, well, if God is for me, who can be against me? And if I have the commitment to him, it's like, you know what? I made a promise. I'm in. I'm good. And I know you're good. As far as east is from the west, you separated my sins from me. Like, you're here. And compliance? Well, I've seen your track record and what you promised. Like, you're going to bring me out the best, so I'm in. So I'll have this faith to please you. And the very faith that we see in Mary, maybe it transferred straight to her son. Because it's not Jesus someone that we can look at to see having this attentive availability to his heavenly Father. Right? And so often in the scriptures we see Jesus praying, God, what's your will? Where do you want me to go? What do you want to do? Is this the time? I mean, he is constantly putting himself in a position to listen to God. Humility, honest humility, first off, Jesus became a baby, put on flesh. Like, that's a big deal. That's humble in of itself. But when he became a man, he took the posture over and over again of a servant, washing people's feet, touching the untouchable, loving the unlovable, lifting up others. And said, I did not come to be served, but to serve. And courageous obedience. Man, just look to the cross. God, I don't want to drink from this cup. I really don't want to do this, but not my will, but your will be done. And when he said yes, God was faithful. And yes, he died. And yes, it was sacrificial. And yes, it hurt. And yes, it cost him something. but there was a resurrection on the backside that brought life to him and to everyone around him and for everyone. And I think the same could be true for us. Will you stand with me? As we close today, I want to invite us to just remember Jesus and to ask God to shape faith within us. And we're going to do so by spending a couple minutes taking communion together. Here are the sides and 2 tables in the back. The Lord's Supper. In the Bible, it talks about that if you are a follower of Jesus, if you have said yes to following Christ, that you're invited and encouraged to partake in the Lord's Supper or communion, where we come to this table, and as Ben leads us in this song, I'm going to invite you on your own just to come up, or maybe someone you're with, and to take this piece of bread and to eat it. But the bread is actually representative of Christ's body that was broken, right? Because we did miss the mark, because we weren't amazingly awesome and got everything right, but we couldn't hit the mark. We weren't so amazingly awesome, but nonetheless, he loved us and he gave himself up for us. And so we eat of that piece of bread to remember Christ's body broken for our sin, for my sin, for your sin, and he paid the price that we deserve, but he paid it with his own flesh and blood. And then we take of the juice and we drink from the cup, and we remember that it's representative of his blood being poured out. That his blood was poured out to cover us and to provide a way for all of us to have grace be our story, and not what we've deserved, but rather what he's gifted us, that we receive it, it covers us, and we are forgiven, and our sins are separated from us as far as the east is from the west. And so as we take and we eat and we drink and we give thanks, we move back away from the table. It inspires us and infuses us with the notion of faith. To say, God, I'm available, I'm paying attention. God, I'm humbled because we're not eating meals in my honor, we're eating meals in your honor. And I want to be obedient, because I believe it brings about the best, not just for me, but for the world around me too. So let me pray. And then as Ben leads us in this song, come and take communion here in the front or in the back. God, I thank you for this church. Grateful for this time of year that recenters our heart. And God, just this miraculous arrival when you came in our midst. God, help us have attentiveness, availability, God, to what you want to do in our lives during this season. Help us, God, keep our eyes open to eliminate distractions, God, so we can see you more clearly. To be intentional, not just seeking inspiration and motivation, God, but be intentional and seeing faith not so much as something we just work up, but we work it out. God, would you cultivate humility inside of us just like your son Jesus? Help us consider others more significant than ourselves. And God, would you please help us to put our yes on the table, to consider each one of us individually. What is the next step of obedience that you are calling us to? And God, to say, yes, I'll follow. So move us in your direction in our midst.